Change the way you think and your life will change forever. You are who you think you are. In 1869, a 27-year-old man who had just graduated from Harvard as a doctor of medicine was experiencing a life crisis. Not only had he faced difficult times before, but he had also dealt with illnesses and bouts of sadness during his 6 years of medical school. This time, however, it was even worse. He had contemplated suicide for months. The young man's name was William J. James, who would later become the most famous psychologist in the United States and one of the founders of the School of Pragmatism. James overcame his sadness on his own, but it took him 3 years. It should be noted that James wasn't just sad. McDermott, who edited William James's works, wrote about the severity of his mental health issues. James spent a significant portion of his life trying to understand why he didn't take his own life. During this time, James also experienced panic attacks and hallucinations. He had gone through similar painful experiences with his father years before. Due to this, James believed that his illness was biological and that he couldn't recover. However, in 1870, James had a significant breakthrough after reading a piece by the French psychologist Charles Renouvier. He wrote in his journal, "I think yesterday was a crisis in my life." I finished the first part of Renouvier's second essay and see no reason why his definition of free will, the sustaining of a thought, because I choose to and I might have other thoughts, needs to be the definition of an illusion. At any rate, I will assume for the present until next year that it is not an illusion. My first act of free will shall be to believe in free will. This realization is at the core of James's philosophy. He believed that we have power over our thoughts, which means we can choose one thought over another. However, James did not claim that we have power over our minds. Many things pass through our minds when we take the time to sit and notice them. Thoughts are just there, and we cannot change them. However, we do have free will, and we can choose which thoughts to focus on. This means that we can change the direction of our awareness. This understanding is crucial in our daily lives. It's the difference between saying, "I can't help but feel this way," and saying, "I choose to feel this way." This book is all about choice. It takes effort, but you can learn to control your thinking and choose what you think. There is also a better way to control our thinking that can improve our lives and jobs. That is the main point of this book. For me, the most important thing in life is having control over your thoughts. Your thoughts determine how your life turns out. You can achieve anything if you change the way you think. This simple truth changes everything. Thoughts are incredibly important, as many great thinkers have written. Ralph Waldo Emerson, who was William James's uncle and a great inspiration to him, put it best, "You become what you think about all day long." I believe this to be true, but we need to understand that thoughts lead to actions. This means that you can't change what you do without first changing what you think. So why do we need a book about practical thinking? Our brains are the most useful tools we have. They are more useful than any technology or instrument. As the writer of Mastery said, "If there is any instrument you must fall in love with and fetishize, it is the human brain, the most miraculous." Our brains are the most inspiring information processing tool devised in the known universe. They possess a complexity that we can't even begin to fathom, with dimensional powers that far outstrip any piece of technology in sophistication and usefulness. However, there is one problem. We don't know how to use this great tool that we were born with. We're not very realistic, and even though we think we're smart, studies show us to be anything but. Dan Ariely, author of Predictably Irrational, says this about our decisions. We usually think of ourselves as sitting in the driver's seat with ultimate control over the decisions we make and the direction our life takes. But alas, this perception has more to do with our desires and how we want to view ourselves than with reality. Over the last 100 years, scientists have found more than 100 cognitive biases or mistakes in the way people think. This is strong evidence that we are not practical thinkers. A lot of the time we make choices based on our emotions and gut feelings without having all the facts. I've read a few books that helped me think and make decisions better. I liked them, but they were all lacking in one thing. They were useful through stories. They do a great job of showing why we think the way we do. But I couldn't find a book that showed me how to change the way I think. That's why I wrote this little book. It has everything I know about how to think. That's why I'm writing this, to give you at least one idea that you can use to improve your life, business, or job. That's why I put all of my best ideas in this book. I made Think Straight so that you can read it more than once, and I hope it helps you, especially when things are hard. To keep this book useful, I use theory, stories, and my own experiences to give you tips that you may or may not be able to use. My first thought is that these kinds of books will only help you if you have an open mind. Now, if you don't think that's you, I can save you an hour. Just get rid of this book. Burn it, ask for your money back, give it away, whatever you must do. Make a clear choice. Use it or leave it. Use what works. I'm not an expert on what people think because I'm not a physicist, psychologist, philosopher, or anything else. Throughout my whole life, I've believed that I have no power over my thoughts. I was happy one day and sad the next because of that way of thinking. I also got angry quickly and couldn't figure out how to fix easy problems in my business, relationships, and job. But I learned how to think better by writing in a diary, reading, and thinking about myself a lot. In what way do I know I can think better now than before? I am no longer ruled by my thoughts, and this makes me very happy. The way I use my mind is no longer the other way around. That, to me, is what better thinking means. It is not about how smart you are or how many math problems you can solve. It is about how you use your mind to get what you want. While I don't claim to know everything there is to know about how to think better, I do know how to use my thoughts to live a happy, healthier, richer, and more worthwhile life. Change your thoughts, change your life is true for me. I gave up on starting my own business, was very stressed, and hated my life just 3 short years ago. I felt stuck. I don't want to make my situation sound too serious, though. I think we've all been there, and if you haven't felt stuck in your life yet, you will. It's a normal part of modern life. The importance of training your mind. To think clearly, you have to work at it. I compare the mind to a body that needs regular exercise to stay strong. To keep your mind sharp, you can learn new things. I thought that learning stopped when school did, though for some that's the end of high school, for others it's the end of college or graduate school. We pick up new skills, ideas, and theories at school that change how we think and act in the world. But once we have a way of thinking, we don't change it very often. We like having the same thoughts because they make us feel comfortable. We know that new things are scary, so we do everything we can to stay away from them. We're creatures of habit who would rather let our minds rest than work hard at something. The phrase, "I need to relax and watch something on Netflix," is used by a lot of people these days. I've also said it. That makes me think, why do we need to rest from the work tasks we do over and over again, thought processes that we are used to? When we're not under a lot of stress, like when we have an exam or test to take, we don't really push our minds. We might ask, what's the point? But the point is to train your mind, just like you train your body to stay healthy. Why not work out your mind the same way you work out your body? You don't go to the gym for 4 years and then stop going for good. Also, your mind is the most important thing you have, and you need to train it to use it correctly. Epictetus, a Stoic philosopher, said it best: "The life of wisdom is a life of reason." It is important to learn how to think clearly. Thinking clearly isn't something you can just do. You need to train yourself to do it. Epictetus said that we need good training because we don't know how to do it. My thoughts were all over the place for most of my life. I never even thought about thinking. This is how my thoughts would look if you asked me to draw them. A diagram, a drawing that is all over the place. That mess you see up there is what my mind looked like on the inside. It was a mess of good, bad, sad, happy, and most of all, confused thoughts. I always asked myself, why can't my brain stop? Where's the pause button? Now that I think about it, I didn't know how to make the most of my beautiful brain. I went from Leeuwarden, the Netherlands, where I grew up, to London in 2014. It was a big change from where I lived before. The place I moved from had 100,000 people living in it. Now it has 7 million. Finding a place to live was especially hard. Things were tougher than I thought they would be. I learned from reading and talking to my new co-workers that it was almost impossible to find an apartment quickly without getting ripped off. I opted to rent a room instead, which was easier for 3 months, and I chose to explore different parts of London that were only an hour's ride on public transportation from where I worked. That was my plan, and at first everything went well. After 2 months, I finally found a cheap, small, one-bedroom flat in Oldfield, which is in the southwest of London. I had everything planned out. I got out of the room rental agreement and signed the one for the new place. My parents and brother came over from Holland to help. Since I didn't have much stuff, we could use their car to move it from the old place to the new one, which was only 10 minutes away. This seemed like a deal to me. After getting the key to the new place, I would just move in. I would give the old owner the keys back, take it easy, and watch Netflix. I thought I could do everything in one day as well. It looks like things didn't go as planned after all. My new landlord changed her mind at the last minute and no longer wanted to rent out her flat. This was something she told me the day before I planned to move. I suddenly didn't have a place to live, and my SUV was full of my stuff. I was really scared that night in my parents' hotel room. I had no idea what to do. And now I'm sitting here like a fool because I had nowhere to go, and my stuff was in a van. I brought you guys over from Holland. For the rest of the day and evening, I kept blaming myself. You may be wondering, really, yes, I do think that. I may have been a little too extreme when I look back on this. Let's just say what happened. I was a little too emotional, right? That's why I chose this example. It shows how stupid my thought was. I thought about things so much that I lost track of what was going on. What was I thinking when I wasn't clear? Some trouble in the first world. Let's go. As soon as I woke up the next morning, my parents and brother pushed me to stop feeling sad for myself and start looking for a way out. So I told myself, think straight. I knew I needed to get rid of the mess and make things clear. I felt the need to get right to the point. I saw this on the left and a bunch of thoughts that don't help, like worry, stress, pain, confusion, and not knowing what to do. On the right, a single thought that does help. I wanted to start making tools out of my mind. It was important for me to find a quick answer for my London story. From there it was easy. As long as I could think straight, I reserved an Airbnb until I could find a new place to stay. We ended up staying in an Airbnb for a week. The owner changed her mind again and agreed to let me rent the flat. That's why all of my worrying, stressing, and thinking were so pointless. How often does that take place? We decide and jump to conclusions so quickly based on what we think. Everyone here is a person all the time. We mess up, change our minds, and think things that aren't true. That's fine. Going crazy with your thoughts is not normal. And after a lot of other pointless thinking, I chose to change. I didn't have a big shock or major event that made me decide to change. Life isn't like a Hollywood movie. I know people who only change after a lot of troubles. At some point, we have to say enough. And you know what? Many people don't change at all, but we shouldn't worry about that. I had had enough of emotional pain after years of chaos in my head. That's the most beautiful thing I can make out of it. There's no need for an all-is-lost moment. Those kinds of things don't happen very often. I began to change my thoughts about 2 years ago, and now I know how to get rid of the chaos in my mind and replace it with focus. There's peace now. The rest of this book will tell you step by step how I did it. But first, I'd like to talk about some history of thought. A short history of thought. We all have thoughts, but not all of them are good. The most important thing is the nature of your thoughts. Alexander the Great, a Roman emperor and Stoic philosopher, said it best. The universe changes, but our lives are what we think they are. It's clear that things are changing faster than ever. There are fewer jobs. Computers turn you into a zombie. Schooling costs a lot of money. Living costs rise quickly while wages don't, and you have less time for yourself and so on. It feels like you wake up in a new world every day because life changes so fast. What do you think about that? If you're like me, these events make you think a lot, which means you worry and are unsure. How do I stay alive? How can I make my business fit new market conditions? How can I move up in my job? How am I not going crazy? It's hard to control your thoughts. Thought control has been a goal for as long as people have lived. Philosophers of all times and places have agreed on one thing. Since the 5th century BC, the mind is a tool for solving problems. And many philosophers say that the quality of your thinking affects the quality of your life. All of these people Confucius, Socrates, Descartes, and William James talk about how they think and see the world. A lot of us know that Socrates said to question everything, even yourself. "I know one thing, that I know nothing," is what Socrates reportedly told the Oracle of Delphi when Socrates was named the greatest man on earth. He is smart because he believes he doesn't know anything. That's a way to think. René Descartes, a French philosopher who lived in the 1600s, went even further. He had doubts about everything in life, even his own survival. How do you know you're not thinking or living in the Matrix? That's why he famously said cogito ergo sum, which means I think, therefore I am. Descartes came to the conclusion that he must exist because he can think. You do exist, even if your thoughts are crazy, so why not make your life a little more useful, fun, practical, and light-hearted? Have you ever paid attention to your feelings or written them down? I want you to try it for a day. Sit down and write down what you're thinking right now, about every 2 hours. Don't be scared of yourself. A lot of the time our thoughts don't make any sense. We're divided as a species. Descartes also looked over his own ideas and found a lot of problems with them. His main idea is that we should question where our beliefs come from, not the beliefs themselves, since most of them are based on how we or other people see things. How many of your ideas come from what other people have told you, or from how you feel or what you think at the moment? Being able to tell the difference between truth and lies is at the heart of thought. What is real, what is not true? A practical point of view is one way to look at that question. To quote William James, pragmatism is the attitude of looking away from first things like principles, categories, and opposed necessities and towards last things like fruits, consequences, and facts. This means that thoughts should serve a purpose. If they don't, they're useless. This is called straight thinking. Pragmatism is a way of thinking, not a solution. In fact, all thinking is a way of thinking. Your thoughts are an instrument, but they can be conflicting. Thinking is not only hard, but it's also the single most important thing in life. Remember, the quality of our thoughts determines the quality of our lives, and our decisions are a result of our thoughts. Life is not linear. I used to think in a linear way, believing that A leads to B, and if B is C, then A also leads to C. I focused on appearances and made many assumptions. However, my thoughts served no useful purpose. Instead of thinking, I followed convention and let others do the thinking for me. Most of us are like that. I honestly believed that getting a college degree would guarantee me a job until I was about 26 years old. I learned the hard way that nothing is guaranteed in life. You have to work hard to make money, and having a degree has nothing to do with making money. If I had to choose another predictor of career success, I would say skills. The better you are at something, the more value you can add to other people's lives. Most of us think there's a straight line from where we are to where we want to be. For example, let's say your goal is to start a business for more freedom in your life. That was always my goal, and I thought I would work on it until I reached it. However, I had to take many detours along the way. I worked for other people and started businesses that failed. Realizing that life doesn't go in a straight line helps us change our thinking. Along the way, I faced setbacks and almost gave up, but now I know that things don't always go as planned, which helps me come up with backup plans or alternative ways to reach my goals. For example, when I lived in London and Amsterdam, one of my goals was to invest in real estate. However, I didn't have enough money to get started. It was in my hometown that I found my first deal. Prices were low, I knew a lot of people, the population was growing, and the city was investing in new businesses and education. 2 months after deciding to look elsewhere, I bought my first deal there. The point is that there are many ways to reach your goals, and if everyone else is doing something, you probably shouldn't either. Your brain is always working, even when you're not consciously thinking. It processes all the information that comes in and compares it to what it already knows. This is how we think and how our brains come up with new ideas. The brain is made up of many small networks of neurons that connect to each other. I don't worry about how to directly use the information I learn. I feed my brain with information that interests me, and different kinds of information may be saved in different networks. I don't mind if I connect the dots later. As Steve Jobs said, you can't connect the dots looking forward, You can only connect them looking backward. So, believe that the dots will connect in the future. To ensure this, form the dots in your brain by learning, doing, making mistakes, reflecting, or anything else that feeds your brain with information. A heuristic is a strategy derived from previous experience with a similar problem. One well-known heuristic is trial and error, a strategy for finding answers to problems. However, trial and error is not always the most practical strategy. If we relied on trial and error to build a career, we would probably never achieve that goal. Life is too short to apply trial and error to everything. Another heuristic that's not practical is social proof. We often make decisions based on what others do or say. My favorite heuristic is familiarity. It suggests that past behavior that led to good results is not a guarantee for future results. The familiarity heuristic also explains why we favor things and places we know over novelty. It's one of those things we encounter every day, like eating the same things, walking the same route, making the same mistakes and completing the same tasks at work repeatedly. Then we complain that our lives are stuck or boring. No wonder you're making decisions based on familiarity. But who says that familiarity is always a good thing? It's good for certainty, but to achieve a breakthrough you need something different. Making decisions based on heuristic techniques might ease the cognitive load, but they are far from practical. Often heuristics lead to unsatisfying outcomes. If that's the case, take it as a sign that you must change something. Instead of relying on heuristics to filter information and make decisions, rely on the main idea of pragmatism. The idea that true is what works can be interpreted in various ways. Taking drugs, for example, may work for some people, but it's important not to take this idea too literally. Instead, consider it as a filter for the information that enters your mind. When faced with decisions, ask yourself if the outcome will truly impact your life. By consistently asking this question, you can filter out useless information and focus only on decisions that have a real impact. This forces you to prioritize what works, what's useful, and what affects your habits. For instance, conventional thinking suggests that bigger cities offer more opportunities. While this may be true for some, it didn't work for me. I found bigger cities crowded, with dirty air and a high cost of living. Eventually, I moved back to Ladwarden, where I found peace, familiarity, and a better work-life balance. It's important to recognize that what works for one person may not work for another. Stop overthinking and dwelling on useless thoughts. It's easy to get lost in your own mind, especially at night. However, I've realized that 99% of my thoughts in the past have been useless. They didn't solve problems or contribute to my understanding of complex ideas. Instead, they were just worries and stress. I call this a preoccupied mind. To overcome the preoccupied mind, you can't eliminate your thoughts entirely, as you can't control your consciousness. Instead, be aware of your thoughts and choose which ones to pay attention to. Don't blame yourself for having certain thoughts, but rather focus on thoughts that are within your control. When it comes to useful thoughts, there are two main types. First, focus on solving problems by putting your brain to work. Second, seek to understand and internalize knowledge that can improve your life and work. And remember, useful thoughts are those that you can control and that serve a purpose. Avoid dwelling on the past or fantasizing about the future, as these thoughts tend to be useless. By focusing on what you can control and prioritizing useful thoughts, you can lead a more purposeful and fulfilling relationships, etc. That's it. You can ignore every other thought. If you're constantly thinking without a useful purpose, it's because you haven't trained your mind yet. You have to get out of your head. If not, you'll go mental. Everyone will, no exception. Ask yourself, is that worth it? Do you really want to waste your time, energy, and life on useless thinking? You and I both know the answer to that. Commit to stop thinking about useless things. Start taking control of your mind. All that worrying about the past and the future is not going to help you. It never did, and it never will. Don't trust your mind. Have you ever made a decision that seemed illogical looking back? We're very illogical beings. Every person creates their own social reality. The way you view the world is completely subjective because we all have cognitive biases. The concept of cognitive biases was introduced in 1972 by two psychologists, Amos Tversky and Daniel Kahneman. A cognitive bias is a systematic thinking error that impacts judgments and therefore our decisions. My favorite cognitive bias is the attentional bias. It's scientific evidence for the idea that your life is a result of your thoughts. The attentional bias states that our perceptions are affected by our thoughts, and naturally our perceptions determine our actions and decisions, which make up our lives. If you have negative thoughts, you also have a negative perception of life. That's what it says. The confirmation bias is one of the most well-known cognitive biases. It describes how we act when we want to confirm our beliefs. If you believe in something, you will work hard to find information, clues, and signs to back that up. In other words, you do everything to prove you're not wrong. You don't look at facts, you look at your beliefs. This is what all cognitive biases do. Because of this, when it comes down to making decisions, don't base them on your beliefs, obvious logic, or even science. Scientists are human, which means they have cognitive biases, and they're known for finding evidence to support their own ideas. If you want to make better decisions, you don't need more information. Instead, I've found that a pragmatic and neutral point of view leads to better informed decisions. Unfortunately, there is no such thing as the best decision. When I feel like I can't get out of a thought pattern, I look at the list of cognitive biases. It's simple and free. Just go to the Wikipedia page for the list. Most biases seem like common sense, and that's the point. Cognitive biases explain why we do things that don't make sense when we look at the facts. I hate making assumptions, but I do them all the time. If someone doesn't answer my email, I think they don't care. If someone says, sorry, I think they're not really sorry. If I have a headache, I think I'm sick. I know I'm not practical because assumptions are not facts. To think clearly, you need to get rid of all assumptions and only look at facts. The pragmatist clings to facts and concreteness, observes truth at work in particular cases, and generalizes. To keep things simple, let's look at two ways to decide. One based on facts and one based on assumptions. Does your product solve a problem, or do you think it does? Can you raise money for your startup, or do you think you will? Will you get a raise, or do you think you will? I try to avoid making assumptions. As much as possible, I prefer to rely on facts to come to a conclusion. However, there are times when you can't rely on the facts. In rare cases like these, when facts are unavailable or a quick decision needs to be made, I trust my instincts. Regardless, it's important not to waste time on other people's unfounded guesses and opinions. In the previous chapter, we discussed the distinction between true and untrue based on facts. But are facts always the truth? The answer is no, which can be confusing. It's similar to life itself. For example, does God exist? I don't know, as I have never seen any evidence. However, if God has an impact on someone's way of life, it's true for them regardless of what scientists may say. Friedrich Nietzsche, a German philosopher who greatly influenced Western philosophy, famously said, "There are no facts, only interpretations." Nietzsche was a man who truly understood himself, as even Sigmund Freud acknowledged. He was highly analytical, especially when it came to his own thoughts. When Nietzsche said that there are no facts, he meant that, as human beings, we ultimately rely on our interpretations of reality. This doesn't mean that nothing is real or that we are all living in a dream. It simply means that facts do not equate to the truth. Embracing this idea can save a lot of energy, as it means that no one can be definitively right or wrong. It's not practical to invest time in convincing others of your version of the truth. Instead, focus your energy on more useful endeavors. Taking your time to think is crucial. Quick thinking may seem smart, but it often leads to inadequate responses. Derek Sivers, one of my favorite thinkers, claims to be a slow thinker. It is commonly believed that our initial reaction is the most honest, but I disagree. Our initial reaction is usually outdated, relying on past answers or triggering emotional responses from previous experiences. Thinking things through requires time. Whenever I provided a quick answer, I realized I wasn't truly thinking, I was being impulsive. Derek Sivers learned not to trust his first thoughts. which helped him manage his time and attention better, particularly when dealing with a high volume of emails from readers. Instead of going completely off the grid, he found a more practical solution. Derek writes on his blog, "I could remain reachable as long as I don't answer questions." I'm glad he didn't act on his initial idea, as his second idea is much more effective. Having emailed Derek myself in the past, I can attest to the significant impact he has on people's lives. What I'm trying to say is that when someone asks you a question, it's okay to say, "I don't know." You can also say that to yourself. I've often been too hard on myself because I didn't have an instant answer to my personal problems. That doesn't make you dumb, it makes you human. Why are we even afraid that people think we're stupid? It's the perfect example of slow thinking. Instead of following your instinct of, "I'll prove them wrong," you can take a step back and ask yourself, why do I even want to come across as smart? If you really think about it, it doesn't matter what others think of you. I think it's always better to take your time to think. If others think that makes you stupid, they are the ones who are making quick decisions. Shall we book a business trip to Thailand? Are you interested in a speaking gig at Company X? Should we renovate the kitchen? Do you think we should fire John Doe? How about hiring another sales executive? These are just a few questions others have asked me recently, and you know what? Just as I like to take time to think deeply about my challenges, I also take time to think quick decisions through. Every time I said yes to a speaking gig, interview, or giving a seminar, I didn't think about it for long. When things are in the future, we're more likely to say yes. That trip is planned for September. It's now March. That's ages from now. And without thinking about it, you commit to a 5-day business trip or family vacation. But when September comes, you're either in a great professional flow, have other more important commitments, or are in the middle of something else. Now all of a sudden that quick yes from ages ago is on your mind all the time. Should I cancel the trip? Should I go? Should I go for 2 days only? Why do we make things so complicated when we can easily solve these things by just taking an extra day to think? That's all you need, just think things through, like know yourself. For instance, I'm currently in a great writing flow. I don't feel the need to leave my city. I have a set routine every day, and it works very well for me. I feel happy and I enjoy my life a lot. When I go away for even a weekend, my whole routine can be messed up, and then I need another 2 weeks to get back to my bold self. However, I don't always have this mindset. Right now I'm working on this book, opening a new office and buying a new apartment. I'm focused on a few important things, but other times I'm more flexible and actually do like to travel, visit friends, business partners, and live a looser lifestyle. That's why I now take more time to make decisions instead of following my first thought. I say, please give me a day or two to think about it. That's all you need. Release your mind. Once I changed my perspective on life, I started training my brain every single day. I started reading 2 hours a day and taking extensive notes of the things I learned. I also started writing articles to share the ideas I learned. In the beginning, I felt like a new world opened up to me. I couldn't get enough of learning more. I bought new books every week and devoured every piece of new knowledge I could get my hands on. But after a few weeks, I had a mental breakdown. All of a sudden, my mind froze up. I felt blocked. I couldn't think, read, or write. My head hurt all day long. That went on for a few days, almost a week. I felt ill, and I didn't understand why. I couldn't even think about why. And when I felt better, I just picked up where I left off. This time, I went on for longer, about 2 months before I hit another wall. But this time, it was different again. No matter what I tried, I didn't feel like I was improving or learning new things, but I kept going and pushing through the difficulty. After this pattern occurred a few times, I finally understood what was going on. Training your mind happens in stages, and before you can move on to the next phase of your learning development, you have to get through a wall. I believe that both learning skills and developing yourself happen in stages. At the beginning of a new stage, things are easy to learn because everything is new, but the closer you get to the end of a stage, things get more difficult. In my case, I got headaches, but I wasn't near the end yet, because after a short setback, I got back at it again. At some point, you hit a big wall. That's the mental breakdown. It's also a point at which you want to give up whatever you're trying to achieve. writing a book, starting a business, changing your career, or leading a group of people. When you hit a wall, everything stops. The book all of a sudden seems useless. And words have been our primary way to communicate, and that's why we also think in words. When I think, I talk to myself, and when I take notes, I also talk to myself. Create a chapter about drawing your thoughts is what I wrote in my notebook when I came up with the idea for this chapter. I find that fascinating. One of the best-known thinkers of all time, Leonardo da Vinci, thought visually. How do I know this? I took a look at his notebooks, which you can easily find if you Google them. Here's an example. Now, we don't have to become this great at drawing, but I think we can still learn something. Drawing frees your mind from constant verbalization. I started drawing the images from my blog posts over a year ago. My drawing skills haven't improved, but my articles have, and one of the reasons is that I take time to think about how I can visually share my idea. I want readers to immediately get what I'm trying to share in the article by looking at my drawings. That's why I think a lot about visualizing an idea. Sometimes I draw a graph, sometimes I emphasize a sentence or word, and I even make simple cartoons. After I make the drawing, I often edit my article to make my idea clearer, and some articles even start with a drawing. This book also started with a drawing. It's the drawing I used in the From Chaos to Clarity chapter. Here it is again. I made that drawing without a purpose. I was just visualizing some of my ideas. One of my ideas is that it used to be chaos in my mind until I found a way to overcome it. As a result, I think clearly. That's the whole drawing. And now, it's a book. Be yourself, not what you should be. Be yourself instead of the world. What are you good at? What are you bad at? How do you learn new things? What do you love and what do you hate? In other words, who are you? What's your DNA? Yes, biologically, we're all pretty much the same. We all have organs, bones, blood, nerves, and we all die. Why is knowing yourself important? I had no idea. No one ever talked about it in school, but I made bad choices because I didn't know myself well enough. The jobs I had, the girls I dated, the things I chased, the choices I made, and the people I spent time with didn't match my strengths, values, skills, and desires. For example, my ex-girlfriend wanted to live in different countries and travel the world. I didn't like that idea. I wanted to stay close to my family and best friends. I didn't feel like I was missing out on anything if I didn't go. I worked in boiler rooms selling useless things to people who didn't need them. I don't know why I did that, but I probably did it for the money. I thought that's what you do. But I didn't know myself. I know myself better now than I did 10 years ago. And I'll know myself even better in 10 years. Knowing yourself is the first step. Acting on that knowledge is the second. Sometimes opportunities come my way. You might not have time to think when it's not important, but make it a priority. If you don't, you'll end up like I did a few years ago. I didn't think about anything from 2012 to 2015, and all of a sudden, I felt overwhelmed and didn't know what to do with my life. I had a real midlife crisis. I didn't know what to do, so I started reading more books. I noticed that many smart and happy people kept journals and thought more about their lives. Specifically, they thought about the things they learned, the mistakes they made, and the goals they reached. When I started writing in my journal every day, I started by writing my autobiography. It's not meant to be published, it's meant to help me learn and reflect. If you don't know what to write, write about your life. Write your thoughts. My money rules. One of my friends told me he hates his job. I asked him why he didn't take any action. I need the money, he said. I automatically knew that he assumed that the only option for him is to quit. The reason is that we become too dependent on something when we give it too much importance. There's a simple solution to devalue the value of money. I live by these 5 rules. That's what I've done for the past 3 years, and I haven't had a single thought about money. Actually, that's not true. I still think about money, everybody does. But as soon as I think I have enough money in my savings account, I stop thinking about money. No matter what happens, if you have enough money to survive for 6 months, you'll figure it out. There's only one condition: invest in your skills. It's naive to think we'll always be able to find a job or make money. But since when is that a surprise? I just make sure I invest my money instead of spending it. Investing money is not only about investing in the stock market or in real estate. I have no problem paying $3,000 for a new laptop because it's a tool I use to do my job, and that makes me money. Also, I'm never cheap when it comes to buying important things. I'd rather buy a good jacket that lasts years than buy a cheap one that I have to replace next year. Simply put, I don't buy things I don't need. I don't need a new iPhone every year. I also don't need $5,000 shoes. But that doesn't mean I own only one pair of shoes. I simply don't buy everything I like. Buying stuff in excess is not practical because I don't have enough space. Plus, I like to train myself to resist things to improve my self-discipline. Remember, money is a replaceable resource. When you're out of it, you can earn it back. You can't say the same for time. Don't spend too much time thinking about money. Don't try to think your way out of everything. This doesn't make sense at first sight, but when you think too hard, you often come up with bad ideas. That's because you can't actively think your way out of everything. We've all had good ideas while taking a shower because we're not actively thinking. It's good to let your attention wander and stop thinking. This is also a part of controlling your mind. You have the ability to decide when you want to let go of your thoughts, similar to relaxing your muscles when you lay on the couch after a tough day. You can let loose of your thoughts in many different ways. Some like to take a yoga class. Others prefer to meditate every day. The medium doesn't matter. I've learned that there are many ways to relax. However, only one thing is critical. You don't need anything to relax but yourself. You don't need yoga, exercise, meditation, music, sense, or whatever it is you think you need. Let go of everything. You can escape your outside world and go inside your mind to find peace. If you can't do that right now, train yourself. Become aware of your thoughts, observe them, and let them go. That's the whole process. You can do that anytime, any place. You don't need a different scenery or class to do those things. Let go and relax and do it as often as you think is necessary. You'll find that the moments you're not thinking are just as important as the times you are actively thinking. Be unconventional. I've grown to hate conventional thinking, not because I want to be different, but because conventional thinking gives you conventional results. I don't like that, and if you liked conventional results, you wouldn't be reading this book. Let's examine decision-making for a second. The most conventional method for decision-making is to create a pros and cons list. Benjamin Franklin is the first who documented this method, and today we create these lists all the time. What are the pros and cons of quitting my job, breaking up with my boyfriend, taking this job offer, buying a new car, starting a business? And then we take a sheet of paper, draw a line in the middle, and start listing the pros on the left and the cons on the right, or vice versa. Even though I like the simplicity of this method, I stopped using it after one of my friends recommended me to create one of these lists when my first relationship hit a rough patch. I actually made a pros and cons list for breaking up with my then girlfriend. When I think about it now, I'm ashamed, and it didn't even make any sense because there are always factors that by themselves outweigh all of the other factors. Nearly all pros and cons lists for relationships are the same. Pros of staying in a relationship, having someone to share everything with, having sex, going on holidays, etc. Cons of staying in a relationship, less free time for myself, getting in fights, going to in-laws, etc. It's always the same, and it's not useful. The same is true for quitting a job you hate. The pro is that you're free from a bad job. The con is that there's a lot of uncertainty. It's time to break free from this conventional thinking. Instead of binary thinking, start thinking more abundantly. It's not this or that in life. You can have this and that. I always thought I had to either quit my business or take a job. Also, many of my friends think you should quit your job to start a business. Whoever said these things? When my business wasn't growing a few years ago, I just took a job at a large IT research company. I managed my business in the evenings, weekends, and sometimes during the day. The rest of my time was dedicated to my work for the firm. It is possible to start a business while still having a job. This is what I mean by thinking outside of the box. We often limit ourselves with narrow and conventional thinking, staying within a box. This is because we fail to step back and look at the bigger picture. Consider the drawing below you. If you are standing inside a maze, you will likely start walking towards the middle. This is what you would typically do in a maze. However, this maze is different. The prize is not in the middle, it's outside the maze. To see the goal, you need to take a helicopter view. It is impossible to see the goal from within the maze. But this is how most of us live. We tend to do things conventionally because that's how they are typically done. When you stop doing things the way they are done and start doing things the way you want to get them done, you'll realize that you don't need to ask why. I have a peculiar habit when it comes to sending emails, especially when selecting recipients. I often type the first letter of a name and hit enter, trusting the computer to choose the correct address. I admit I am lazy. Most of the time, it doesn't matter, and I receive amusing responses from people. However, there was one instance where this simple mistake cost me 150,000 talen in business. I was working with two companies on a multi-year consulting deal. Both of my contacts had the same name. Let's call them Vim. One was an existing client, Vim A, and the other was a prospect, Vim B. Both individuals wanted the same type of consulting for their companies, but I gave Vim A a better rate because he was a loyal customer. Unfortunately, instead of sending the contract to Vim A, I sent it to Vim B. This mistake was not innocent. Vim B had previously seen my proposal, which had a higher total price. When he saw that Vim A got a lower rate, he was upset and decided not to do business with us. From this experience, I learned three things. Always double-check. Small things can become big things, and don't play favorites. There is no use in asking why I made a mistake or why I was always lazy with email. I simply was, and I was wrong. There is no way to justify my mistake. Never brush off important details and say they don't matter. Maybe it doesn't matter if you hit snooze every day or ignore the details of your book report or movie. However, not striving for perfection can become a habit. Don't worry about being a perfectionist. There is no such thing. People are not always perfect. Perfectionism is just an excuse for being afraid of what other people think of our work. Instead, when facing problems, challenges, or mistakes, think about what you can do to overcome or stop the things that are hindering you. Pay even more attention to the details. I missed a small detail that cost me a lot of business, but the lesson I learned was worth more than the potential gain. Details are probably the most important thing in business, work, sports, art, and life in general. One of my favorite sayings is, "The devil is in the details." But I never followed that advice because I was too impatient. I was always trying to rush through everything. Emails, calls, reports, assignments, essays, and so on. That was my first title. The Art of Practicality initially caught my attention because it sounded familiar. However, when I started writing my own book on thinking and used the same techniques, I began questioning the meaning of the art of. I couldn't come up with a satisfactory answer, so I knew I had to change the title. Interestingly, my second title, The Power of Pragmatic Thinking Like a Genius, was even longer and generic. I realized that many books start with the power of, so I did a search on Goodreads and found 83.5 book titles with those words in the title or subtitle. It became clear to me that in order to make my book stand out, I needed a different approach. 2 weeks before the release, I started promoting Think Straight on my website and social media, and my fans quickly became excited. I received emails expressing anticipation and praise for the upcoming book. It was motivating to see such positive feedback from my readers, and it reinforced the importance of choosing the right title. Even though no one had read the book yet, the title generated interest, which was my ultimate goal. I want to express my gratitude to everyone who emailed me before the release. Your support means a lot to me. As an author, it is our responsibility to ensure that our book is the best it can be. This requires paying attention to the smallest details and continuously striving for improvement. However, it's essential not to become consumed by overthinking and never taking action. The reason I focus on improving my thoughts is to make my life more interesting and fulfilling. I believe in getting the most out of every experience because it brings me happiness. It may sound contradictory, but by not overthinking every aspect of my life, I'm able to live more fully. One area where I struggled with overthinking was exercise and maintaining a healthy lifestyle. I used to play mental games with myself, questioning when to work out or go for a run. I would delay going to the gym until the next day. After indulging in unhealthy snacks, I would ponder which days of the week were best for working out, creating unnecessary complexity. This excessive thinking didn't help me stick to a routine. To simplify things, I established a few basic rules: working out for at least 30 minutes every day, eating healthy foods and avoiding junk food, and keeping track of my diet and exercise. Creating these rules helped me establish a system that I could follow without constantly having to think about it. If the results weren't what I desired, I would reflect and make necessary adjustments. Reflecting on my past, I recall the valuable lessons I learned from my grandmother. She always prioritized kindness and emphasized the importance of strong family values. However, the most significant lesson she taught me was to avoid regretting what I didn't do rather than what I did do. When my grandmother passed away in January 2015, I made a promise to myself to always remember this lesson. I used to dream of living in different places and traveling the world, which is a common aspiration. Many people are inspired by famous travelers like Jack Kerouac and Ernest Hemingway. Nowadays, young people look up to social media influencers who document their global adventures on platforms like Instagram. While the way we travel and share our experiences has evolved, the desire to explore remains constant. However, I have come to realize that this way of life isn't for everyone. It took personal experiences to truly understand this. You can't fully comprehend what it's like to be an entrepreneur until you try it for yourself. Simply reading books and watching videos won't make you one. I value the freedom to pursue my passions and interests over financial security from a job that doesn't fulfill me. I don't dwell on the past. I prefer to live in the present and enjoy each moment fully. I'm not constantly looking back at old memories or watching old movies. Being present is more important to me than capturing every moment through a screen. Of course, I still capture some family moments, but I don't obsessively document everything. It's important to let go of things from the past that hinder our ability to live in the present. Old possessions, records, and awards can create unnecessary attachments to the past. It's liberating to let go and focus on the present. When things don't go as planned, I find solace in writing in my journal. It allows me to reflect on my thoughts and understand why certain situations unfolded the way they did. For instance, when my membership site didn't perform as expected, I analyzed what I could have done differently. I spent 3 months setting up the site, creating content, and promoting it. However, after 6 weeks, I decided to shut it down. While some people believed I gave up too soon, I realized that running a membership site was taking up valuable time that could be better utilized to grow my family business and teaching career. I came to the conclusion that a membership site was not the best path for me. Instead, I considered other options and reassessed my goals. I recognized that I could help people in various ways and that I had multiple streams of income. With this realization, I made the decision to close the membership site after only 6 weeks. It wasn't a failure, it was a learning experience. Looking back, I can see what I could have done differently, but it's important to move forward and focus on the present. In summary, it's crucial to strike a balance between thinking and taking action. Overthinking can hinder progress and prevent us from fully enjoying the present moment. By improving the quality of our thoughts, we can improve the quality of our actions. It's important to reflect on the past to learn from it, but dwelling on it excessively serves no purpose. Ultimately, we should strive to live a life that aligns with our true desires and values. Throughout my experience and learning, I have realized that I can only handle one significant task at a time in every aspect of my life. It is important to reflect on the past, but not to dwell on it for too long. Life is happening in the present, so it is crucial to take good care of your time because it is limited. We all learn this eventually, and once we do, we start paying more attention to how we utilize our time. Thoughts are like a double-edged sword. They can either make us stronger or weaker, depending on how we think. It is important to understand that our mind is just a tool, nothing more or less. In this book, I discuss how I have learned to use my brain more effectively. There are times when we need to change our thinking patterns and times when we need to stop overthinking. It is essential to choose when to use each approach, but it is also important not to think excessively, as it can be a waste of time. However, thinking alone is pointless if we do not take action. As we have mentioned before, good ideas must be followed by good deeds. To emphasize this point further, here are some thoughts that I believe will help you improve your life, grow your business and career, envision your future, generate new ideas, solve problems, and plan enjoyable activities with your partner, family, or friends. Understanding this concept is not difficult. The challenging part is adopting and maintaining this way of thinking. Just like any other skill, thinking better requires daily practice. I personally achieve this by considering everything that happens to me as an opportunity to think more clearly. By doing so, I avoid wasting time on futile matters such as complaining, feeling sorry for myself, and not appreciating my life. As a society, we often think too much and miss out on the beauty of life. It is not about comparing ourselves to others or chasing after what they do. We all know that it is the little things in life that make it beautiful. Did you notice the sun or the raindrops when you woke up this morning? Did you savor the aroma of your coffee? Did you touch the grains to feel their texture? If the answer is no, then you need to shift your focus from your thoughts and start experiencing the world around you. The main goal of all this is to find inner calmness. Regardless of what happens in our lives, our minds should always remain calm. This is the most important aspect of life. If we can master our minds, we gain control over our thoughts. Remember, the only way to achieve this is through daily practice. Mindfulness or meditation are terms often used to describe this practice, but don't overcomplicate it, no matter what you call it. The key is to find inner peace. You don't need to spend $110,000 on a school to learn how to calm down. Simply sit down, connect with your thoughts, observe them, and then let them go. That's all there is to meditation. I personally meditate whenever I walk, work out, write, wait, sit, lie down, or engage in any other activity. It helps me find peace, and I always make time and energy to go inward. It is important to understand that you don't need a yoga mat, music, or a guide to learn how to control your thoughts. I have mentioned this before, but it is worth repeating. Anytime you want to calm down, you can go within yourself. You don't need a drink, a vacation, or new shoes to achieve this. It all comes down to understanding that we have control over our thoughts and their impact on us. You can do it too. Lastly, I want to highlight that many of the ideas discussed in this book stem from the pragmatist school of thought. If you look up pragmatism, you will likely come across the work of Charles Sanders Peirce, who used to teach at Johns Hopkins University. Trends come and go, but if you delve into the history of philosophy, you'll find that William James named Charles Sanders Peirce as its father in 1898. While some people highly regarded Peirce as an intellectual in the 1880s, he had lost favor by the end of the 1800s. In the 1860s, James and Peirce met as students at Harvard's Lawrence Scientific School. Peirce was once seen as a math and logic genius and later became a professor at Johns Hopkins University. However, he was fired in 1884 due to a scandal involving his second marriage. In 1875, Peirce's first wife left him, and after 8 years his divorce was finalized. During those 8 years, he lived with another woman, despite still being married. Peirce's academic career ended after Simon Newcomb, who worked with Peirce, apparently exposed his scandalous behavior. This caused a public scandal, and Peirce was devastated that he never found work in academia again. He struggled financially for many years, even living on the streets of New York City. The only person who assisted Peirce during this difficult time was his old friend, William James. In 1870, James overcame his own sadness and began writing a body of work that remains important to this day. James achieved a Harvard professorship and fame in the academic world after publishing Principles of Psychology in 1890, following 12 years of work. Unlike James, whose career had been steadily progressing, Peirce's life took an unexpected turn in 1898, when James attributed the idea of pragmatism to him in a talk titled Philosophical Conceptions and Practical Results. Pragmatism suggests that ideas should be evaluated based on their usefulness in real life. James believed that scientists were wasting their time on theories and ideas that were too general and didn't have practical applications. If a scientific theory explained how the Earth was formed, for example, it should have an impact on how people live. Peirce believed that complete proof of anything was unattainable. Lou Manon, who wrote Pragmatism, a Reader, shares this perspective, stating that every choice we make is based on our beliefs about how the world works. Regardless of what people think about practicality, one thing is certain: James did a good thing by giving Peirce credit for the idea. Without James's recognition and support, Peirce's contribution and the concept of practicality may have been forgotten. James's actions were significant. He helped his friend Peirce gain attention, and in his later years, Peirce even wrote a few papers. This is the most important lesson I've learned from James. The greatest use of a life is to spend it on something that will outlast it. In real life, there's no point in doing something that will outlast you because you won't be around to witness it. However, the point is that if we strive to do or create things that are useful and important to others, our time will be spent on matters that truly make a difference. By doing so, every person's life will hold value. I appreciate your support and willingness to join me on this journey. It was my aim to share my perspective and provide you with a valuable reading experience. I hope that this book serves as a source of strength for you, particularly during difficult times. I encourage you to revisit its contents multiple times, as your commitment to completing it brings me great joy.